Today's episode is about how to build a successful SaaS business on the side of your full-time job.
I realized the only way for me to get what I want out of, a career is just go and do it myself. When you have that kind of itch and it just never goes away. Your mindset shifts from how do I kind of move up a corporate ladder? How do I, really get a good review on my end of year? How do I get a good bonus to? How do I find customers? How do I market this? How do I build a team? And you're just thinking completely different. Look at the existing products and services that are out. See things which are quite old and have been around for a while, generating a lot of revenue, and see and understand if you think you can make a better version of it. You still always feel this like imposter syndrome. It never goes away, but the more you kind of go down the route, the more results you see, the more you realize, okay, like that decision I was thinking about, I wasn't really sure about, was actually a good decision, right?
But according to our investigators' report, we find that Mr. Green doesn't have a steady income.
Let's go.
Hi everyone, my name is Varia and this is Shameless Careers, a podcast about building a career you love. Today's episode is about how to build a successful SaaS business on the side of your full-time job. And I'll be discussing this topic with my guest, Elston Baretto. Elston started his career at JP Morgan as a software engineer. He then quit to build his first company, which didn't work out, and after that, Elston went back to employment and decided that this time around, he was going to try to build a business on the side first. He launched a SaaS company called Tiiny Host, which provides web hosting services, and this time, everything worked out. The company has been growing steadily, reaching 200k visitors per month and 30,000 in monthly recurring revenue. This success allowed Elston to quit his job, continue scaling his business, and enjoy the more flexible lifestyle he has right now. So, Elston, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start from the very beginning of your career, and if you could mentally bring yourself back to the time when you were leaving JP Morgan. Can you tell me about this time? Did you have any doubts when you were leaving such a prestigious name?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, go back to when I first joined JP. So when I, graduated, worked really hard through the education system and then landed like a really good job at JP. And this to many is like, one of the best career paths ever. It's a massive bank, massive brand. But after, a few weeks into the job, myself, I realized that this is literally, if I continue down the road, is going to be the only path and where I'm going to be in the next 15, 20 years. And I looked at the people next to me and they were basically just, versions of me, but sitting next to me with, I don't know, maybe corner offices and things like that. But it didn't look any more interesting than where I was. And so I just couldn't foresee myself continuing down this path, right? And just being down this for the next 15, 20 years.
And what do you think now, looking back and taking stock of it, what was missing in this path for you?
I think for me, and it comes from an individual, right? So I was really interested in lots of different things. So I'm a software engineer, but I also like, marketing, I like design, I like, management. And there were lots of different things that I wanted to get involved with as I, went down my career and life. And when you work in a big company, it's the way it's meant to be. Everyone is kind of pigeonholed and siloed into certain roles and activities because that's the way the structure needs to work. And even if you do, I think, go higher up into the rankings, then you don't really have as much diversity in tasks as you think. You're basically managing hundreds of people. You have big budgets you're looking after, and you're basically just looking at numbers more than the actual product or task. And so things just never really lined up with me. And so I just always wanted to do a lot of different things. And I think I accidentally discovered that I wanted to be a founder or entrepreneur, right? Because that's essentially what you're doing. You're always dealing with different problems, different skill sets, wearing different hats. And growing up, I was always that kind of person, like, engineering and building things and making things. And I realized the only way for me to get what I want out of, a career is just go and do it myself. And that's when I started like on my own, really thinking about, what I wanted to do, what I wanted to build, and how to shape my own future as opposed to continue down this route, which, I've been fortunate to come across, after going to top university, joining a graduate scheme and joining a big bank. But it took me, that amount of time to realize that this wasn't for me.
And did people try to persuade you to stay? And did they ask you questions like, "Oh my God, are you making a mistake? Think twice."
Yeah, 100%. And that was, I think, one of the reasons that I stayed there probably a bit longer than I should have. Family, friends, and other people were just looking at, and from the outside, these big brands and companies look amazing. So, but when you're inside and you realize it, it's just not, what it looked like from the outside. And so for me, when you're actually in the inner workings and you realize like how a company works, it was by far an amazing experience. I learned so much about, how the world works through these large companies, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything. But when you have that kind of itch and it just never goes away, right? No matter how long. People said maybe stay there, stay there for 2-3 years, make it look in a good CV. But then it's the problem is that the longer you stay there, the harder it can be to leave. Mainly because some of these advantages, such as new salaries and stocks and shares and bonuses, etc., get compound essentially, right? And so you really at some point just need to take a stand and just say, okay, look, enough is enough. I'm going to take the risk. And the reality is, if you develop and keep good relationships, you can actually always go back. So it's not the end of the world. And it seems to be some people like, it's the biggest thing ever. Like if I leave this is the end. I have to make it work. But I failed along the way after I just left that company, and then eventually succeeded in what I wanted to do. But it was just about making the first step. That's the most important thing.
So can you tell me what's happened after you left? You started your first business, and how did that end up being?
Yeah, so I left to co-found a company with a friend of mine, and we were kind of developing software in the legal space for law firms. And that was a really good opportunity because I had a family friend who was basically helping, to invest in the company. And it was an opportunity for me to go and build a product, build a team, and grow it. So it sounded like a really good place for me to kind of jump from a big company to entrepreneurship. And the thing is, we spent a lot of effort building the product, but we just weren't good enough in the marketing and the business development side of things. And so after I set myself a target, I set myself 1 year that I'm going to basically focus on this and build it. And after that, make up my mind if I wanted to stay or kind of move on to something else. And that was an amazing experience. It was a remote company. So the company was based in India, hired, about 10 to 15 people. And I really learned how to build a team, how to, build apps and software engineer without just being yourself in it. And so having that understanding of what it takes to build a product like that. And I've really developed my technical kind of expertise. And it was just a really good, experience in SaaS, like the first ever kind of understanding of SaaS for me. But after that year, unfortunately, like the business never kind of kicked off to a level that I wanted it to. And so I wasn't able to, financially just continue, living like that. And so I said, I want to go back, reset myself, maybe go back into, the job market, not necessarily the corporate world, but, and then, take a stand from there and see where to go.
I was about to ask you, did you think that, okay, maybe now I've tried entrepreneurship, seems to be difficult, seems to be risky, why don't I go back and build like a corporate career again? Did you have these thoughts, or were you like, no, I'm gonna be entrepreneur one day and I'll figure it out later?
No, I think it was, for me, when I had that realization really early on and at JP, it was like, I need to make this work one way or another. And for me, like, life just wouldn't have been life if I hadn't had, it that way. Like I would just be very unhappy in that. And so I had to make it work one way or another, but I think it's about figuring out the right strategy. And so it wasn't, nothing really attracted me from, a point of like go back to corporate life and the advantages, because I had that for 4 years, but there was just that itch that was there. And I saw a lot of people around me who've kind of gone to similar journeys and friends who've also had successful companies. And I said, there must be another way to make it work. And kind of also knew that it was not going to be like, one shot success. It's a journey. And that's the most important thing. Like once you start it, once you go down it, once you start really understanding what it's about, you figure out what it is. Because like you go through like 15 years of education or more to to be skilled for the workforce. And typically it's for you to be employable by somebody. But actually, if you want to go down entrepreneurship, you probably need another 5-10 years of just down that route before you can be as good as if you were employee for somebody. And I just had 1 or 2 years here and there, right? And so, like, if I spend the last 10-15 years trying to figure out entrepreneurship, I'd be as good as if I was, employed by JP kind of thing. And so that's really interesting. Like, once I went down that path, I figured stuff out, things start to click, right? And so things start to make sense. You realize why things didn't work out the way, what you did wrong, what you should do, what the trends in the market are, how to build a team. And your mindset shifts from how do I kind of move up a corporate ladder? How do I, really get a good review on my end of year? How do I get a good bonus to? How do I find customers? How do I market this? How do I build a team? And you're just thinking completely different. And that's when, you've successfully entered this kind of area where eventually you succeed, right? Because you're just constantly thinking about things in the right way.
And before we go into your second business that you started on the side of your new employer, can you tell me about how you chose the second employer in the first place? Did you kind of care what that was? Or were you a bit strategic about it in any way?
I think, yeah, I was. And so I did make a mistake along the way when I left my first business and then went to find a job. I made a mistake of trying to join another startup. And the problem is when you do that, you essentially are diving straight into basically another really high pressure environment. And so that doesn't necessarily give you the headspace to think about, what you want to do next. It's much easier to do it, I think, at a larger company where they're moving at different paces. And so even if you try to put in, I don't know, more hours than you could, sometimes you're just blocked by the level of the pace of the team, right? And so I was in a software engineering role. And so, yeah, I tried to jump into another startup. I left after 6 months. That didn't really work out for me. And then I basically joined a larger company. And honestly, I was fortunate because that was probably one of the best jobs I've ever had. I mean, it was the perfect balance between a startup way of operating. So they had access to really new like tools and just services and stuff when you're developing a product, especially in software, which is very different to JP, which have a lot of red tape, and so you couldn't use a lot of the tools and programming languages, basically, right? It was very structured. But then you had the safety net of like a really big company, which was doing pretty well. So you had the best of both worlds, and the team was very supportive. I really enjoyed working with everybody there. But then I just still had that itch, right? So I realized like this is as best as it could possibly get. I mean, the other way would be I move and join one of the big, tech companies, the FANGs as I call it. And that would probably be even more work and a lot more money, but I don't think I would have been happy that way either. And so in my head, it was just like, I need to make it work by myself some way or the other.
And based on what you've learned, do you think it's a better strategy to start a business on the side versus leaving your employer and starting your business like you did last time?
I really think it's up to individuals, right? And so advice, it's very subjective to your situation and what's going on. I know people, have good friends out there who, only are performing really, really well when their back's against the wall, when they literally have to make it, have to pay rent or whatever. Otherwise, it's never going to work for them. But for me, I wanted somewhere where I could have, control over, the next jump. It was super helpful for me because, I mean, the advantages are, the biggest one, I think, when you're doing it on the side is you only have a certain amount of hours a day, a week, and even a weekend to focus. And so you basically have to do the best work in those few hours. I've had, friends who are running businesses and spend entire weeks just trying to figure out the color scheme for their logo, which is completely useless, basically, until you have a product or even a brand out there. But yeah, you have 2-3 hours. You create a logo in like an hour. You create a website another hour, and then you just start building your product and you start marketing it. And so it helps you really focus on what you need to do. And then especially when you have a new product where you're trying to break into the market and figure it out, a lot of the times it can be just ups, highs and lows. You're waiting around, timings aren't kind of correct. So some of the marketing strategies that we grew with took 6 months to take any effect. And so if you were doing that full time, I think you would have gone crazy. I would have probably, and I probably wouldn't have given the patience the company needed, the product needed for it to be somewhere. And so you have this infinite runway, right? Which can be good or bad. In the startup world, one of the biggest reasons companies fail is because they run out of funding. The runway basically shuts down, and so they can't pay anyone. There's nothing. But when you're doing it on the side, you basically have indefinite time to experiment, right, and tweak things and change things. But that can also mean maybe you spend too much time on something which is never going to get anywhere. But the hope is you learn, you keep iterating, you try different things out, and so those are huge benefits of doing something on the side. And then you make a bridge and you kind of leave at the right time when you're comfortable with, and then you do what you need after that. So it's up to an individual, but for me, like, those advantages were super helpful.
And what about not burning out if you run your side gig on the side of your full-time job? Do you have any tips around how to stay sane?
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part. I think, interestingly, it was a lot easier when you're just starting off, because it's all in your control. You don't have users, you don't have customers. But when it starts growing and you have real customers and people that kind of need and want attention, they're paying for you, that's when it can get a bit more difficult. And at some point, you're just like running 2 jobs. But I think for me, like, I try to set certain boundaries. So I'm a night person, so I used to work like 2 hours a night, maybe 4 days, 3 or 4 days of the main week, and then a weekend I would basically set myself maybe 6 to 8 hours of like doing that. And so between that week, I managed to get like 20 hours of work kind of done. But then I never said no to social commitments, so if people asked to hang out and those kind of things. And so that was super important, not to like just consume all of your time with working, because that is, I think, very bad. So if someone wanted to hang out on a Friday, or somebody's kind of birthday party, whatever, I always made an effort to go and do that. But I think it's all about being controlled about it, and it's about understanding that it's a marathon, especially if you're doing it on the side. Like, you're not going to get instant results. You can be very into it as well, but you really need to understand that you need the breaks. And sometimes, like on a Saturday or Sunday, I would just do nothing. But you came back from it refreshed. You had more ideas than ever, and you let your head just kind of relax, right? And even today, like to this day, where I think when I had those periods where I'm just not working with nature, whatever, you come back and you have all these new ideas in the way you think. And so it sounds like it could be like a waste of time when you're trying to really like drive forward and build something, but it all plays into the bigger picture, right? And it's subconscious helps a lot.
It's so interesting to hear this, because I feel like there are 2 schools of thought on productivity. So I'm listening. I don't know if you know Alex Hormozy.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, he's a hardcore example of like, okay, let's not focus on anything in life, but like work, because you need to get the results. But there is the other philosophy that you have mentioned just now, that, well, it's ultimately about balance. Also, you want to enjoy what you do.
Yeah.
And I don't know anyone who would live unbalanced life and enjoy that. And also, there is something to be said about creativity. To your point, I don't think we always have our best ideas when we're ultra-focused.
Exactly. And when you're sitting in a desk in a room, just on a computer, like it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like you're very focused onto that task, right? And even if I step out for like 20 minutes for lunch or whatever, suddenly like new ideas start coming into my head, right? Because you're just out and about. And I think that's super interesting. But yeah, there's different schools of thoughts, and even with entrepreneurship in general, there are hundreds of ways of building a business, hundreds of ideas you can build. It's really about taking the advice you see out there and applying it to yourself, right? Like, There are people that will just work 20 hours a day, people that work 2-3 hours a day and get things done. And it really is about seeing what you resonate with, right? There's different ways of building a business, and there's not one shoe fits all kind of strategy.
So can you tell me about the idea of Tiiny Host, so the
Yeah.
business that you're running now and that you have successfully started on the side back then?
Yeah.
What does the company do? How did the idea come about? How did you find product market fit?
Yeah. So Tiiny Host basically is an idea that came from my personal problem space. So I basically thought it was very difficult to put something online these days. So I'm a software engineer, and originally, if I had like a website and I wanted to put it online, there were a lot of steps you need to do. But if you could basically automate it and you knew how to do it, you could do it in seconds. So I built like a very small working prototype that would you basically have a file which was a zip file of like a website, so HTML code. You drag and drop and you put it online, and in seconds you have kind of a website, a link for it basically. And it's basically slowly grown into this platform where you can share anything online. So now you can share PDFs, you can share PowerPoints, you can share images, code, a lot of different things. So for example, if you're still using a Google Drive link to share a presentation, that's by far not the best way to do it anymore, because Google Drive links look ugly, for example. You're basically sending a very random string to somebody in email, doesn't look professional at all. But with Tiiny Host, you basically take your PowerPoint presentation, PDF, you drag and drop it, and you have a very clean looking link, so you can customize the link. It's got analytics, so you can basically see how many people view it. You can password protect it if you need it. And you can also connect it to your custom website address. So it's a very well branded thing. And the most interesting thing I discovered along the journey is that when you send a Google Drive link or Dropbox link to somebody, they can be blocked by corporate spam filters. So a lot of big companies, they don't allow you to open these drives because of security reasons. And so this is where we come in super useful, because you can now send a pitch deck or whatever presentation on your own URL that can be opened, and you can track it. And so all of these kind of use cases kind of came in. But basically what we've done is we've taken web hosting, which is not familiar to a lot of people, and we've made it for non-technical people. So we've simplified it a lot. And so if you are in hospitality and you want to upload a restaurant menu, if you want to upload your CV, if you want to upload a sales deck, if you want to upload your HTML code, that's basically, we are the platform for you. So there's hundreds of use cases for it, but essentially we've made it easier to share things on the internet. And people have really resonated with that. We're simple. We're very, very simple. Like from the time you sign up to having a link, it'll take you 15 to 20 seconds. And that's been the core principle in mind. And I think one of my personal product strategies and things I'm good at is just simplifying complex technology, making it more accessible. And that's been really helpful for a lot of people.
And you've mentioned that the phase of 0 to 1 is more difficult. So can you tell me about your journey in this respect? What was the struggle as you were looking for this product market fit? I mean, right now, the way you talk about the idea, it sounds like it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Of course, this should exist. But what was the journey like?
Yeah, I mean, it started basically by just scratching your own itch, they say. So figuring out how do you solve this problem that you have, right? But I've done it in probably the way that most people wouldn't recommend. I did zero market research. I basically just didn't pre-sell it or anything. I didn't have a community or an audience to sell it to. I basically said, I want to solve this problem. I'm going to do it. But what I really wanted to do was learn how to market. So I've done projects and apps and businesses before. But this time I said, I'm going to spend 3-4 weeks just building the app and the product, and then I'm going to spend the rest of my time just marketing it. I'm not going to add more features to it. I'm not going to write more code. I'm just going to figure out how to market, because I'm a software engineer and I knew nothing about marketing. And that was it. So that was really the difference in the strategy. And it was really about trying to figure out who was going to use it. So I launched it deliberately without any specific use cases in mind. I said, look, this is the tool that you could use. And I just put out everywhere. So Reddit was like one of the best platforms to really start that. So I posted many times on Reddit, got banned from many subreddits, as you do. But then I had a few, users coming through. So I think we got our first 200 users. We didn't even charge for anything back then. And I was just analyzing what people were doing with it. That was super important. And so they say one of the most important things is like speaking to your users and understanding what your users are doing with it. And so I didn't speak to them as much, but I was constantly analyzing what they were uploading, what type of content was it. But also on Reddit, people were giving comments, right? So they were basically saying things like, it would be cool if you have this feature, or like, this needs to be a bit faster. And all of that feedback was basically coming back to me. And I was in my head trying to formulate an idea of what this could be. And so it was very much trying to market it a lot with some basic enhancements and improvements, but like maybe 70% marketing and 30% kind of building out the product. That was what the first few months really looked like. We were making zero for like the first, 3-4 months basically.
And would you do it any differently? Because you said, I didn't do any market research. But to me, actually, what you've done sounds like super reasonable, because you pilot something that is a tool, and then you discover the use cases based on customer feedback. I guess that's the most authentic research you can possibly do.
Yeah, but I mean, if I did do market research back then, I would have found some competitors, and they are out there, that I would have basically seen as negative reasons to start the company. So maybe I would have been put off a bit more. But actually what I realize now in going through the journey is that if there are other companies in that space, it's validation that it's actually a good idea. It's not a negative. You shouldn't take it as, oh, okay, like someone else has got the idea, so I need to do something else. I got really lucky with the idea because it's in a massive industry. So I could have, done something very specific to, hospitality, but the web hosting industry is huge. It's a multi-billion-pound industry. And then it basically happened to be also a big interest of mine, right? So ever since a young age, I was interested in the web. But I realized that the industry eventually, down the line in industry, is infinite. It's very, very large. And it's very old as well. So there is a lot of room for opportunity and change and new products in that space. But looking back, hindsight is a beautiful thing, because you can see all these things which are out there. And a lot of people, would have come and said to me, like, the web hosting is done, right? Why would you consider building another web hosting company, essentially? But I didn't build just not a web hosting company. I took what already existed and made it, modern. I figured out how to make it for the current demographic and the users of the internet, which the big, older, archaic companies are not focused on, because they're already running their ships and they're already moving, at that pace. And so, I don't know. I think now, these days, if I start another opportunity, it would either have to be like a drive or something I really wanted to see and I maybe didn't have much data on, but I had a hunch that this is going to work and this is the future. Or I would do some level of trend analysis. Like, you could look at Google Trends to see what people are searching for, things with AI, like what the future looks like a bit more, and then dive into that space.
And I know that a lot of people struggle to find the business idea, and probably for the reason that you have just referred to, that on the surface of it, it sounds like, okay, everything already exists. Like, I don't know, like anything you can come up with, there is some tool or service for this. So what would you recommend to these people in terms of how to look for your niche specifically?
Yeah, honestly, I would look at what is already out and what already exists, because it really depends how difficult you want to make the game, right? So if you want to make it really, really difficult, go down and try to build, hardware, robotics, go raise venture capital money. Like, it's a complete different ballgame. If you want to make it really, really simple, honestly, look at the existing products and services that are out. See things which are quite old and have been around for a while, generating a lot of revenue. and see and understand if you think you can make a better version of it, right? So have a go at it. Maybe there's tools and apps or things in your work environment that you've used and you think need to be better, and just make a better version of it. And so the reason Tiiny Host really worked is because we took something that existed and we simplified it, number one, but we also repositioned it. So we simplified it to make it drag and droppable, so anyone can use it. And then we repositioned it for a market that wasn't technical. So when I first launched Tiiny Host, a lot of people were basically saying, why does it need to exist? Like, there's all of these other apps out there and services. Like, what's different about yours? But then I found a completely different group of users who basically said, this is amazing. Like, I've never, been able to do this before. It's so simple. I used to have to speak with, engineers and developers basically to make this happen. Now I can do it on my own. And I realized that, okay, I need to speak more and work with these people rather than, the people that said, it already exists. Since that was repositioning. So that was basically taking something that was pointed at one market and then pointing at another market. And so basically taking an existing product, simplifying it, modernizing it, and just repositioning it is a really good strategy. It's probably the least riskiest strategy to build a company, because one of the hardest things is idea validation. And you don't need to think about what the next Facebook is going to be like in terms of an idea. You can just build a better version of what already exists, and that can be a successful company. And I think if you're just starting out, it's your first business, if you're trying to do a transition, you want to make it as easy as possible, right, for yourself. So do that. You don't have to think about a groundbreaking idea anymore. Like, it's about just trying to figure out what needs modernizing.
And any other guidelines on business ideas? So, for example, some people say never go B2C, start with B2B because B2C is extremely difficult. Or never build complex products, start solving for a very, very specific problem. Does it resonate with you?
Yeah, 100%. So if you can focus on a specific audience, then that is a really good place to be, because you can basically align everything from what the branding should be, the marketing, where they exist, what's the best distribution, whether it's email, social media. That's super helpful. And I think it's really important to figure out what monetization could be like, right? So B2B companies will pay you a lot more. It's way easier to get a business to pay you something than an individual. But you need to have maybe some domain expertise, right? Or someone who can help you in that space, or maybe you are in that industry yourself and you can build it out there. So I would technically always try to build a B2B company. B2C companies are way more, exciting, sexy, interesting, but B2B companies are they make more money. They always do. And so if you can build a B2B company, I would definitely try to do that. And it really, again, depends on your backgrounds, right? So the problem with B2B companies is they have very long sales cycles. You need maybe to do a lot of manual sales, calling people, outreach. But then after maybe 3 or 4 months of work, you can land a really big client that will pay you, a few $1,000s a month, which is great. But in a B2C company, in those 3 or 4 months, you probably have kind of acquired maybe 200-300 customers, which will eventually all pay you, a few grand a month. So if you're really good at sales and outreach and have a good network, then B2B makes a lot of sense. But we kind of sit between I wasn't really good at sales, right, and outreach. But so we're off the shelf. We're like B2C, B2B. So, people use us for business reasons, but we don't do long sales cycles. You just sign up, you come, and you buy a subscription. And the average price for a subscription for us is very low. It's $15 a month. But with a B2B contract, it could be a few $1,000s, right? So it really depends on your personality, your skill sets, and where you are.
Yeah. And let's spend some time on marketing. You have mentioned that you wanted to develop this skill, and I know that you were saying to me previously that marketing should be like 50, if not 70% of your time.
Yeah.
Although for many people probably who start a new business and want to build a product, to them it feels like, well, I should be spending most of my time building this excellent product. So why is marketing so important?
It's so gone are the days where you would build something and then people would just buy it, especially if you just like a software. So the problem today is there are so many people building apps and products out there. It's so hard to stand out. So there are so many like services and products and things just all fighting for our attention. You can build a bad product with good marketing turn into a successful business. But now if you try to build a really, really good product and no one sees it, it won't be a successful business. It doesn't matter how well it looks, how well it's polished, how fast it is. If no one uses it, it's not a good business. And because of just the noise as such and just how many people, how many apps and services out there, like the App Store is full of 5, 6, 7, 8 million apps out there, right? And so you really need to stand out. And the only way to do that right now is marketing. And you'll see that some of the newest generations of companies and entrepreneurs are doing it really, really well through influencer marketing. So the next level is basically partnering up with a social media influencer, building an app with them, and having access to this distribution, which you never had before. And so that's super exciting to see. And so it's just the way it is, and it's going to get harder and harder to stand out. But it's going to get easier and easier to build an app. That's the other thing. With AI tools these days, you don't need engineers as much. You don't need a big engineering team. Everyone has superpowers. You can literally just type in, a prompt, and a very basic version of an app is built for you. So more and more apps are going to be released, but AI can't really figure out a marketing strategy and make your business a success, at least not yet, or it's still a hard problem to be done. And so your goal and your strategy should always be, how do I figure out how to get users and customers onto my app? And that's probably the most important thing that you need to do.
And if you are just at the beginning, how should you go about setting up this marketing strategy?
You have to try everything, honestly. There isn't a silver bullet here. I think one of my key strategies and what I tell people, it's marketing, especially online, is like sprinkling seeds literally all over the internet, waiting to see kind of what grows and then like watering and doubling down on that kind of thing. And that's basically it. So when I started the business, I tried everything. So I did YouTube videos, I was on social media, I was on Reddit, I was emailing people, telling people in person, going in communities and sharing it. And once you've tried all of these strategies, you'll start to figure out like which ones are working, and then you can focus on those. But essentially, from 0 to 1, your main objective is to find one single distribution channel that will take your company from 0 to something, and that there is always one. There's not 10, there's not 5, there's just one. And so for us, it was SEO, and that took us about 10 different kind of strategies to figure out it was just SEO that made it work. But another good thing, good strategy is to copy what a competitor is doing. So if you have a competitor in your space that isn't, super, super big, that's kind of maybe just a bit ahead of you, see what they're doing, see what's working for them. So for example, like a lot of web hosting companies do well with SEO. But I'm not going to copy the fact that they've put a massive billboard out there, because that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? But there's certain strategies that you can copy and see which work, which are there. So it is literally just about trying everything, because that's the hard part, and that's why everyone doesn't succeed in reality. Like it's they haven't figured out the distribution to the product. And I think once you find distribution, and everything else is a lot easier, because you get the people coming through the door, they'll tell you about what's good, what's bad, you can update the product. And the problem with just focusing on building a product, and it's the mistake that I made really early on, is that you actually don't know what the market wants. You may think you know what the market wants, but until you get there and until you see people saying, yes, this is great, you're most likely wrong. And when it's your first baby and you're building something, I've seen this so many times. People focus so much on the idea. They try to make it, beautiful. They try to make it exactly what they want to do. But a lot of the times when you have the visitors coming through the door and they actually start using your product, they want something completely different, a feature you haven't even built or thought you built. And you've just spent maybe 6 months building this version of the app, but they just wanted like something completely different. And the sooner you realize that, the better. So you want to make yourself as flexible as possible, right? Because that will also help you figure out how to reposition. Going back to repositioning, I thought the app would be for technical people, but it turned out, I needed to make it for non-technical people because I marketed it. People came through the door. I found out who liked it, who didn't like it. So that is super, super important. It's just being open and just seeing what the market wants as opposed to you. You're essentially supposed to be a shepherd, right, in this, as opposed to like a dictator of the product.
And interesting, you've mentioned that you should double down on the marketing channel that works rather than going across the board. Because you can also argue maybe it's worth making noise everywhere and all the time to market your product. So why do you think focus is actually a more effective strategy?
It's because you are a small company, or a lot of times just one person, right? And so imagine trying to create YouTube videos, run a social media page, run email outreach, and post on Reddit every single week. Basically, you'll burn out. There's a lot, and the chances are you won't do a great job at any 5 of those, basically, because you'll be doing a weak version of all of those. And that's okay at the beginning to really understand, what's working and what's not working. But if you see some traction from one, you will be much better off just focusing and having compounding effects on one strategy for a while rather than spreading yourself too thin. And then once that kind of kicks off, you can hire someone to do it. You can automate it. It's working on itself. You can basically then start to branch out on other things, or maybe things which basically compound it in different ways. So YouTube compounds and correlates with SEO really, really well. So we started with SEO, then we started adding a YouTube channel, and they kind of like videos rank on Google, right? So it works in that way. So it's really about figuring out a single strategy, and then once you've got far enough with it, adding other things, because one of those can easily take you, to $1 million business, like just one strategy, especially some of the big ones. And if you look at any big company which has grown really, really early, there's usually just one strategy that's worked for them.
And what did your SEO practice look like in practice? Like you said, it's worked best for you. So what was it, like blog posts with keywords? Or how did you make it happen?
Yeah, SEO is a content game. People think it's a very complex thing, but it's just time consuming, and it takes a lot of patience that people aren't willing to kind of put in. Like the biggest thing with SEO is finding the opportunities, so the keyword research. So that's basically trying to figure out what people are searching for. So there's a lot of tools out there like Ahrefs or SEMrush where you can pay for. They're expensive, but they will give you like really good insight into what people are searching for. And then once you found those things, like if people are searching for, I don't know, tall plants, basically, you write blog posts for those, tall plants. And you say like, what are the best tall plants for a house? And things like outdoor tall plants, indoor tall plants. And from that, you can start selling products around those. You build landing pages, which are really important. You make YouTube videos around those. And then you figure out other related things. So a lot of my time was invested in figuring out like really good opportunities for us. And that really kind of helped with that. And then it's about producing as much content as possible. SEO is like putting something in the oven and then waiting, 6 months to see how it turns out without basically knowing anything in between. Like it's a black box. You have no idea, how Google will pick it up. But there's a lot of different nuances to it. It's quite interesting from a technical perspective as well. But it's a lot easier than people think it is. But there are a lot of there's a lot of spam and scam in that area, unfortunately. So a lot of people claim to be able to do this. A lot of agencies out there that claim they can get you on this and this. But I knew nothing about SEO. I knew nothing about marketing. I'm a software engineer, so taught myself SEO, and you can definitely do that if you get the right resources.
And would you recommend hiring someone to help you out? I know you've mentioned that there is a lot of not high quality people and advice out there. But if, for example, you're clueless, is there any good resource to hire to help you out in the beginning with everything you've mentioned? Or should you kind of do it yourself and only then hire someone afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, the general strategy, I think, for building good businesses is try it yourself, make it work yourself, and then outsource it when you know what's working. Mainly because it's also really expensive, right? So it depends how much you have. If you have a large investment, if you're venture capital backed, we're a bootstrap business, so we didn't. Then maybe you could hire someone and do it. But agencies are expensive. You need to know that they'll charge you on minimum $2,000-3,000 a month basically to do something, and that amount of investment into something where they can't guarantee you results, right? And SEO may not even work for your business at all. And so you're putting a lot of money, and it could take 3-4 months into something that may not even work, right? Whereas if you did it yourself, you can kind of tweak it, and you're trying lots of different things. Then it can make sense, and you will always have a bit more passion and drive with that marketing effort than any other agency will ever do, because you're just a client to them, right? But this is your business, right? And so it's a big difference. And I think you can maybe hire a consultant, or try to join a community or meet people who have done that before. So I learned SEO from another entrepreneur and founder who just did SEO for their business, and it worked really, really well. So he taught me exactly, what I need to do, how I need to go through things, and the blueprint, right? So I didn't completely just learn it myself on the internet, right? But I spoke to people. There's a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. Hrefs has a really good course that you can kind of do, but get to know it yourself before you just hire someone. You can't expect to just outsource marketing. It'll just never work.
And probably as you test it yourself, you probably learn more about your business and product market fit and what resonates and what doesn't. So I feel like it also is educating you about the product that you're building.
Exactly, and it kind of all ties in. They're not separate business functions. I mean, someone who's an agency is only responsible for your marketing efforts, right? And so if through SEO you learn certain opportunities which are available, if you're doing it yourself, you can tie that back into the product itself and the company, right? So a really obvious example is when I was doing keyword research, I found an opportunity for PDF upload, right? So before we allowed PDFs, we only were allowing zip files and HTML code, right, to be uploaded. And then I saw an opportunity to start ranking and writing content for uploading PDFs, because there was a lot of people searching for that. And it took me 1 or 2 days to implement that into the product. And then it took maybe about 2-3 months to kind of start ranking through Google. And that literally doubled our business. It completely changed the business around, and now enables us to kind of allow people to use us for resumes, for pitch decks, for presentations, all that kind of stuff. But when you have real close control over all the different units and things in the business, and you are involved in it, it means that everything works and just connects a lot easier. And so even if that agency didn't work out or they were too expensive, you still have the knowledge, right? You know what worked, and then you hire the right people around it. And I personally would rather go for individuals than agencies. So I'd find an individual person, individual contributor. So we have an SEO person who's an individual contributor. And he's really good because they work with you a lot closely. There's less There's layers in between. You don't have like an account manager, then implementer, and all that kind of things. It's just one guy basically, and so all the communication you're doing goes just that one person, right? And it's a lot easier.
And you've mentioned to me in the past that it takes different strategies to grow your business to like first 100 users, 1,000 users, 10,000 users. Can you tell me a bit more about that? Why is it so different?
Yeah, because the marketing and the strategies change a lot. So from like 0 to 100, you're still trying to figure out like what the business is, right? Who likes it, who's trying to, who actually wants to pay for it. And you're trying to figure out what the distribution channels are, right? So it's like from 0 to 100, you're probably trying everything. You're trying maybe YouTube, Reddit, social, SEO, etc. And then after 100, you see, okay, out of these 100 people, actually 70% of them came through SEO. So now you're focusing on SEO, and then you're building like the SEO function up. But at each point, you'll stagnate. You'll basically you'll plateau, and your business will basically flatline. And that's a combination of like maybe adding another distribution channel, another marketing channel, or it's basically expanding the product, right? So adding PDF hosting, right, which you didn't have before. And so the business is continuously evolving, right, with everything. And so one channel will work for a long time, but even that channel, there's very different things you can do within that channel, right? And so you'll be an expert in that kind of avenue. And like with SEO, there's YouTube SEO, and then there's like blog posts, there's landing pages, there's keyword research, there's backlinking, there's a lot of different things. So the way you do that changes, and it gets harder and harder to do that, right? The bigger you are, the more market share you need. And so it's a constant evolving game, and that's part of the job, right? It's what makes, for me, exciting, because you're constantly trying to figure out there's nothing ever easy and straightforward. It'll work for some time, and then eventually it won't work. And also the world we live in completely is changing, right? And so 5 years ago, SEO was kind of the king of understanding and finding things. What is it now? It's AI, literally. So a lot of our users come from AI because ChatGPT recommends that they should use us. And so the landscape is changing. Influencer marketing is coming up. And so it's constantly evolving. So the way you market and sell is changing. And so as your business also grows and matures, the way you sell is going to be different.
How did you learn about all the new tips and tricks that would help you at this particular like stage of your business growth?
Yeah, so I think I definitely attribute it to communities. So I wouldn't have been where I am without the community I'm part of. So I'm part of a really good community called Indie London. We have a community event called Indie Beers like once a month in Shoreditch. And then there is another co-working community called Ramen Club. And these are just people literally trying to build companies, sharing ideas, very authentic advice. And so there's that. And then I'd say, Twitter and X is also another community for me. There's a lot of information shared there. And so everyone is constantly talking about how they've grown the business, how things are changing. Starter Story, I've also mentioned, is like a really good place to just understand how other people have grown their businesses. And it's just about being in that bubble. It is a bubble. But when you're in that and you basically can see how people are growing the businesses and things which have worked, you start to figure out how you can apply that to yourself. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, and you've mentioned to me that it's important to always look for someone who is just a little bit ahead of you, because they have probably had this same issue recently, but also tried to figure it out with this new latest technologies.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think some of the best advice I've got is just find a mentor just ahead of you who is basically making it work. Because we think like if you're trying to, start a business, that looking up to Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg is great. And there are like amazing icons and like future goals and aspirations, but they are so far away from what it takes to take any product idea from zero to something. Because they're running huge companies, right? So their problems are all about management, political issues, and a lot of other problems that you don't deal with, right? And even startup founders who are a lot smaller, they don't remember. I don't actually have as much maybe knowledge of what I did from 0 to 1. I know what I did through, what I've documented, but there's like little like tips and things I've discovered along the way that probably I've forgotten, right? And someone who's just done it is just in their head right now, right? So that's a super life hack, right? In that sense. And also the stuff I tried maybe 3-4 years ago may not work today, right? The stuff, Jeff Bezos used to start Amazon probably doesn't work the way it used to. Like, there's a completely different ballgame. Like, now if you start on Amazon, you work with influencers, right? As opposed to how we kind of grew it. And so it's always changing, and it's important that you figure out like what is important now, what is going to work right now, and what are people doing.
Yeah. And to wrap up, what advice would you give to your younger self, and what advice would you give to others who want to start their business on the side?
Yeah, I think my younger self would be just believe in myself a bit more, because you still always feel this like imposter syndrome. It never goes away. And even now, like, you have a company, you have a team and everybody, you still feel like in some sense you don't know what you're doing. But the more you kind of go down the route, the more results you see, the more you realize, okay, like that decision I was thinking about, I wasn't really sure about, was actually a good decision, right? And just believing that your vision, your hunch, and whatever you formulate in your head is actually something to trust and guide you through that. And people who are starting now, it's the same thing. It's just honestly begin. Like, you have to dive in. You can make a lot of excuses for things, but once you begin and you go down a route, you'll find so many other ideas or problems and opportunities in the space. And surround yourself with a community of people, right? Like, especially if you come from maybe corporate worlds or different banking worlds, a lot of people, they don't have the ambition and aspiration to do that. Join a community, get on Twitter. There's loads of like online communities as well, which are there. And try to and see what other people are doing, right? And you are the average of the people you keep around you. That's 100%, I believe that. And so when you're in that space, when everyone is just, building stuff, creating stuff, and it's the normal thing to just do, you really start to, get into a flow of success, right? And that's when like you're in that sweet spot. And now it's like the corporate world is like an entire different life I've had before, right? It seems like it's a completely different person. And it's made me who I am, and I'm very fortunate for it. But it's like before and after now kind of thing. It's just it's surreal.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elston. Super useful tips, and the best of luck on your journey ahead.
Thank you for having me.